Hi, everybody. This is Pastor Tom welcoming you to another study in the Word. Good to be with you today. I hope all is going well in your life. I want you to go to our website, faithalivefellowship.org, when you can. That's faithalivefellowship.org. Have free seminars there for you. And you can donate. You can send prayer requests, all that. That's faithalivefellowship.org. Please subscribe to the video, our video thing, on YouTube, and we appreciate that. Listen, share these too if you like them. Okay, we were talking about spiritual growth. The first one we dealt with proving why it's important that we prove the bishops and the deacons, 1 Timothy chapter 3. I'm not going to read it to you today. You can read 1 Timothy chapter 3 if you wish. You'll see that they must be proven. Their character has to be developed before they can be put in those offices. I was talking about spiritual growth. At the end of our session, I talked about babyhood. Ephesians chapter 4, God gave some apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers for the perfecting or the maturing of the saints. God wants us to grow and become mature. But it's a process, a long process. So today we're going to talk about some of the other stages of spiritual development, and we're going to use natural development to kind of because natural development and spiritual development in many ways is you can connect those two. Excuse me. So we're going to talk about childhood today. Toddlers or a little bit older child, people that are in that particular area of spiritual growth. The first thing about a child that you'll notice, a little child, is the unsteadiness of the child. If you ask them to do something, a simple task, they are very inconsistent in trying to do it, trying to teach a little child to clean their room or to maybe take out the garbage or whatever it is. There's 1,000 different things we could say. This inconsistency. I remember when I was a little guy growing up, I loved baseball. I still like it today. I still like to watch baseball and stuff. And even, I used to like to play it. Can't play it much anymore, but there you go. But the point I'm trying to make is that was important to me at the time. So we didn't watch video games back then. We didn't watch TV even. We had black and white TV, And so our thing was to play outside. We played baseball every night. We played basketball sometimes. We played football. We did other things. We rode our bikes. We went fishing. All that when we were little kids. And I remember specifically one time where my father told me, if you mow the lawn, now listen, mowing the lawn back then was a bummer because we didn't have engine on our lawnmower. We had one of those lawnmowers that you had to just push, okay? And so to mow the lawn, man, that was it wasn't a big lawn, but there's a lot of effort that had to be put in that. You had to concentrate on that. And so he said, you can go play down at the school and play baseball or whatever, but first you got to mow the lawn. And so, okay, well, I started out, wanting to mow the lawn, got about half of it done, and I was tempted because kids are coming by, hey, aren't you going to come play? Aren't you going to come play? You know how it goes. And I left the lawnmower and went and played baseball, left it halfway done. So when I came back, my dad had done the rest, and he was not a happy camper with me. That's the way kids are. They're inconsistent in any task that you give them to do. This is why a little child cannot be given much responsibility in a church. And they're at that childhood stage of Christianity. So there you go. They'll do a task for a while. Here's another trait. You can give a child a task to do for a while, and they'll do pretty good, and then all of a sudden they're just gone. And you see a lot of this in Christianity. People will do a task and they'll do what you ask them to do in church or even at a job or something, and they'll do it well for a while, but then all of a sudden, bam, out of nowhere, they just don't do it anymore. And I wonder sometimes about people like that. It's like, how many times have I told them I want just this done every time, and then all of a sudden it just doesn't get done. That's a sign of some childhood areas there. Another thing is, they just love to play all the time. They like to have fun. Little children like to run to every meeting. I mean, they like to run to every concert Any speaker, it's run, run, run. That's a sign of a little child, spiritually speaking. More grown-up Christians begin to understand the importance of serving in their local church. Somebody has to get the job done. They have to be there. They got to be responsible to be there, so they can't be running over here, running over there. If you have a special services, the more mature Christians will begin to take on the responsibilities in the back, say with the children, say with whatever needs to be done. The ones that are not there yet get angry because they can't be in the service. And it really bothers them. They want to be in the service. They say, I need to be in the service. Well, there's two areas there that you need to understand. Number one, spiritual growth comes by listening to the word, but spiritual growth also comes by us doing something with it. So one of the ways you grow the fastest is to get involved. I remember when I was a younger Christian, really, we just saturated ourselves. Me and my wife, all we did was go to meetings. I mean, we went to every kind of meeting you could think known to mankind. But we never were involved in anything for a long time. The time came where God moved us up to Central California. We just didn't have the meetings up there. We didn't have all these conventions to go to and everything. We were from the LA area. So it was a totally different thing. The Lord got me working in a church. And man, I mean, next thing I know, I was taking on responsibilities, helping in helps ministry and all that all the time. Very rarely could I be out even in the service sometimes. But I did more growing then because I had to put in practice what I had learned. And that's how you grow. That's how you learn. And coming out of that childhood stage of development where it's all just fun, fun, fun. It's run here, run there. Oh my God, brother so-and-so's in town, Prophet Zuma, and I got to go see him. And you get yourself in a lot of trouble that way. I'll never forget the time I had a church in Reno, Nevada, and there was a gentleman that I really liked. He's a good pastor friend of mine, but he didn't have much sense when it came to having some of the people he had come into his church. And he called me up on the phone and said, well, we're going to have this Prophet Zuma. I can't remember his name. I call him Prophet Zuma. And you need, get over here with your people because Prophet Zuma's coming and all this. And I didn't pay much attention to it. But I did, put up his flyer in the back. And some of our kids who were pretty much in this childhood stage, they saw that. Now, Prophet is a big name. Prophet. And the kid was 22 years old. And I'm not against somebody being 22 years old being used by God. But they got over there in this meeting. And they kept telling me, Pastor Tom, you got to come to this meeting. This is fantastic. Oh, man, this Prophet Zuma is giving out words and all this. And I said, well, I better go check that out, and I better go over there. And if it's a good thing, I need to support the pastor. So I showed up. Well, this little guy could preach pretty good and everything, but, he just did not know what he was doing. And at the end of the thing, he said, okay, now I'm going to prophesy. And I got prophecies. I got a certain amount of prophecy I'll give you for a $50 offering, more for, I can't remember how he did it, for 100. Man, if you got more than that, then you'll get a whole, long word. And I'm thinking, this is way out there. This is way off, right? I mean, it's just very apparent. But the thing that got me the worst, oh my gosh, I got to tell you, is our people started going up there and giving this guy money for prophecies. I just was like, I thought I had taught them better than that. But you see, that's children mentality. They're easily swayed. They're easily influenced with things that they shouldn't be influenced with. And so if they run to every meeting, they can be deceived. They can get caught up in things they shouldn't. So that's important. Now, they're overly curious. They can't mind their own business. They're busybody in other people's affairs. Have you ever seen this in a child? Why? But Dad, why? Well, it's because of this. But why? On and on and on. It'll drive you bananas. Well, that's the kind of thing. When you have a little child in your church at that stage of development, whether it's a bishop you're training or a deacon in training or any of these other people like this, they have a legitimate calling. But if they're always asking questions, always concerned about everything, I'm doing this right. Am I doing this wrong? Am I doing this right? And that seems like a it seems like that would be a good thing for people to do, and it is to a certain extent. But if they're just constantly that way and they have no confidence in themselves or in you as training them, they're just back and forth all the time. That is a sign of a child. They can't. I as an example, I'll go to certain churches and they got a church full of children and they got those children age people in their ministry as they're training them, and some of them are in positions already. And their phone at those type of pastors' homes will light up all day long, constantly. I've sat over there and listened to it, ring or text, ding, 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 ring, ring, ring. And these people get on the phone. I listen to the phone calls as they put the speaker on over there. And it's just always the same thing. People can't handle them, can't make decisions. They don't know about this. You know, they're emotionally out of control. They can't control their emotions, are everywhere. Something little happens and it's like a giant thing. They blow stuff out of proportion in their minds. And it's constantly the pastors are getting worn out by this kind of stuff. Well, those are little children. And if you put them into a position of authority and leadership too fast, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get somebody who cannot handle the position. They are not developed even in the natural realm. They're children. Another thing about children, have you ever noticed, is talkativeness. It's like talk, 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 talk. Even though they've heard the word, they've heard the importance of words and being careful with words and stuff. It just hasn't registered yet. You ever see somebody like that? And it's really, really an issue. I remember when I started pastoring, I was blown away by this, because I'd have somebody call me on the phone and say this, Pastor Tom, I need to talk to you. I've got something in my life that I need to discuss with you. And number one, when they call me, the thing they were discussing with me normally was some silly thing that really didn't need to be discussed with me, but they thought it was a big deal. So I would listen to them, and they said, I want your opinion on this, and then they'd start talking. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it would be impossible for me, unless I just said, hey, shut up, stop, which I didn't do because they're young and you don't want to hurt them. You cannot get a word in edgewise. They just go on and on and on and tell you all their problems. Same things over and over and over again. Same things going through their mind. Problems with their mind. Problem with this. Problem with that. Problem with this. And then I'm sitting there. I could have went, put the phone down, and went and made a sandwich and come back and just every once in a while say, okay, hallelujah, and ate a sandwich and played a video game or something they would have never known. And at the end of the session, when I have not even spoke to the end of their life about anything, they said, oh, Pastor Tom, it was great talking to you. You really helped me. And they're off the phone. And that began to happen over and over. All they wanted to do was pour out a mess. And they didn't want to listen. And if I did give them the word on it, or I did give them counseling on it, or I did give them a Bible lesson on it, it just fell right off of them. Well, that's unfortunately children, and it's very difficult to deal with people like that, and to have them in leadership is not a good idea. They gossip. They may start out saying, let's pray for so-and-so, but it ends up being gossip, They're busybody in other people's affairs. They want to know about this thing and that thing. You get a lot of people in church, they want to know everything about leadership, what we're doing, where we're spending our money, this thing, that thing, the other thing, And it's like they're inquisitive about things they really shouldn't be inquisitive about. Instead of minding their own business, doing their own work, they're doing all that stuff. Some folks think they could run the church better than you can, and that's normally a sign of somebody being a child, because it's ridiculous to me. You don't walk into a very, very established mechanic shop and you don't know anything about cars and tell them what to do. You don't come in and say to a brain surgeon and say, hey, I read a book on brains. I'm going to go ahead and operate on this guy. That's ridiculous and ludicrous, but that's how people treat the ministry sometimes. It's ridiculous. Another thing about little children is vain speaking. when they do talk, it's always about them. It's about their ministry, about me. This, what do I do? What do I do? How can I do this? How can I do better? It's always about that, their realm. They only see their realm. It's like nobody else exists almost, and that is always a sign of a spiritual child. You know, always want to talk about their issues and their problems. I had a lady in my church one time, and she just was the most depressed person I've ever met in my life. Always depressed. And I got tired of it one time. I went over to her house. We sat down in her apartment there. She's an older lady, probably in her 60s. And she'll just tell you all of her problems. And she's done it over and over. My family doesn't like me. This thing, that man, when they divorced me, this happened. It's been going on in our church for 3 years. Listen to this all the time. Everybody. They couldn't stand being around her because she was just negative and she just didn't contribute to anything or anybody. And she said, I don't feel good. I'm sick. She wouldn't come to church just once in a while. So I'm sitting there listening to this. And finally I said, hey, look, I said, you're so self-centered and all you see is your own little world. Why don't you go over here and volunteer at the hospital? Why don't you go over there and volunteer at the old folks home? Why don't you do something to give out? Get out of your little thing here where you're just sitting there all by yourself, feeling sorry for yourself, and go out and start contributing to other people and giving. That is the key to not only spiritual growth, but joy in your life and feeling fulfilled. We're not made to just be by ourselves, keep our own, do our own thing. We're made to look out for the interests of others. In fact, even more than our own interests. She didn't get that. She never has got it. She's just miserable today. But we all need to get that. That's a sign of a little child. They just want attention all the time, So self-centered. And they don't even realize it. They don't realize it. And so it's all about comfort. Some of them, over the years, it's just amazing to me. I can't believe it. I had a girl that I was training. She ended up in ministry. She's a fine pastor now. Her and her husband are one of our churches. And but when I was training her, her parents were so overbearing. I remember we were establishing a church. We were in Reno, Nevada. We were establishing a church across the state in Elko, Nevada. Now, this girl is 22 years old, 23 years old. She's a grown adult. She lives, she supposedly lives on her own and all this. And so when we started doing this church, at times I couldn't be there. So I had my young preachers go out and do the services for me. And it was a long drive across the state and so on. But it was, just freeway, and they were provided a motel room and meals and everything. It was all set up really good. Well, when she started doing that, the first time she was going to do it, all of a sudden her mother called me. Her mother, now listen, she's 20, in her 20s, maybe even 30s. I can't remember exactly. I think 20s, mid-20s. Her mother calls me. And her mother is asking me, are you going to send a single woman all the way by herself out there to do this? Do you think that's wise? Do you think it's this? Do you think it's that? I'm thinking, my God, man, the woman's a full-grown woman. She should be able to do what she wants to. It wasn't that if she was concerned about her going out there herself, I could understand that. It wasn't that bothered me. It was that she was literally trying to control everything about this girl's life. And it was just something else. And so, people like that are very difficult to deal with. And but this girl got over that. She did a fine job. She wasn't afraid to go out and minister that way. That's part of ministry. If you're going to be in ministry, there's going to be some elements, maybe of danger at times this season. So there you go. Well, that's children. Children are like that. Preteens, let's go into that. They're beginning to grow, but they're still not there yet, They're not at the teenager stage. That's an awkward stage. One minute I'm a child. The next minute I want to be a grown-up. I was driving with my grandkids here not too long ago, the two oldest ones. They said, Grandpa, we want you to know something. We're preteens now. Do you understand that, Grandpa? I go, okay, I understand. But they're still unsteady. You can count on them more and more. They're learning those things. So you can give more and more challenges to them, but still, they're sometimes a little unsteady. They get big-headed too. The one thing about a preteen is they think more highly of themselves than they ought to think. Many times a preteen will think they know everything everybody else knows, and you get into teenage years even. My God, when I'm 16, I thought I knew everything, and that's happens spiritually speaking. I remember a good man came to our church from another full gospel church. And over there at this particular church, the pastor was not a wise person at all. And what he had done is put this guy on his board, and he was a quote unquote, you are our elder now. You are. And this guy wasn't even, I mean, he had a hard time keeping his life and his marriage and everything else together. He had no business being an elder in a church. He wasn't called to ministry, but it did something to his head. And because he was immature, maybe a preteen at best, it puffed him up. He got prideful. And so he always thought of himself more highly than he ought to think. But when he tried to minister to people, people all saw it. It was creepy. It was weird. It just didn't work. And I remember when me and my wife would go out on the road somewhere, or we go overseas on a mission trip, he would always have a word for us. And it was just like, sometimes people would have words for us, but I got to tell you, that guy was so far off, it wasn't even funny. But all that came about because that pastor had placed him in a position, and he got this spirit of pride about him. And even today, it's affected him. He never really done anything for God. And you can ruin somebody that way. You can really ruin somebody. Putting them into a position of authority and leadership before they're ready can ruin people. And so just remember that. But they're still, so that's how they are. All of a sudden, life happens. They think they're doing really good. They're becoming an adult or a teen, and life happens, and they just fold like a deck of cards. They constantly, a preteen will be like this. Okay, I know I've got to do some work here, but I just want to get to the fun part. So they're not very good at their work. They just do what they have to do, and they want to get to the fun part. You ever notice that about preteens? So they're over emotional like teenagers. They're going through growing pains, hormone changes. So they're all emotional, and that's how the preteens are. Christian teens are. They get really emotional. They're wishy-washy, blown around. Something happens, and one minute they're a faith person, and the next minute, it's boom, they fall apart. And it's really not anything except just the normal trial of life that everybody goes through, but all of a sudden, man, they just lose it, and they're crying, and they're on the phone with, their pastor or their mom or dad or whoever, and, they just have a hard time. That's a sign of somebody that's immature in that area and their emotions. And the Bible talks a lot about that for bishops. They're still very needy. They're easily hurt. If you try to correct them, oh boy, that can be difficult because, they're going to throw a fit and, they're going to go in the room and sob. That's how those preteens are. All right, teenagers, they're know-it-alls. Okay, they're at the age now to where they've had some experience. They think they know more than they do. Many times they want responsibility, but they still, want to have fun, and they want to take on tasks they're not ready for. They overcommit themselves. That's a sign of a teenager. You're at that level of growth. I want to get involved, Pastor Tom, but they don't really realize what they're doing. They overextend themselves into something they shouldn't. And I don't like people to overcommit. I want them to soberly think about what they're going to be doing if we give them a job to do. They're unbalanced. That's another thing. Very much unbalanced. And their brains are not fully developed when they're teenagers. And their mind's, teenager in the spirit's mind's not fully renewed yet, even though they would tell you it is. All right? Some have more baggage than others. But that's the teenage years. The teenage years, they're stretching into manhood. They're trying. They do well sometimes. Some of them are more responsible than others, and they're growing. People ask me about my life. I was in my teenage years of development when I was at a church in Central California and started serving actually as an associate. And I was really learning. But they asked me, well, how'd you rely upon your pastor? Well, I never talked to my pastor about hardly anything except I prayed with him in the mornings. We would talk about ministry. He did talk to me about ministry and things. I'd ask some questions about that. It was all about ministry. But if I was going through a problem or something like that, I learned to handle it myself. And that's what you have to do. You have to be a person that, hey, I'm going to take this on myself. I'm not going to put this on him. I don't need that. I don't need him. I don't need to hear. I can hear from God myself. I can get a hold of God, and He'll tell me what to do. And when you do that, you begin to do that at that age. You begin to really develop and grow. And the only time I had one time where my pastor called me in. I'll never forget it. And he worked me over really good. I did something wrong. I got on the phone and said something I shouldn't have said to somebody. That's the only time I ever got corrected like that. Because I saw how overworked and how over all this stuff was going on in people. And I thought, man, that was at the stage where I thought, oh my God, I'll never be a pastor. Never say that. Okay, now moving right along to manhood. All right, because I want to get this done in this session. Manhood. They esteem earthly things lightly. They understand grace because they've been through so many things. They understand. They don't condemn themselves because they realize, hey, you know what? Everybody makes mistakes, and if not for the grace of God, there go I. They're very well graced in that because we live life. We realize about the grace of God. We understand the power of words. They understand, what it means to study to be quiet. They're reliable. They're faithful. They're willing to take on a task, stretch, even if it's uncomfortable, without any complaining about it. They've learned to walk in love. They've learned not to get hurt. They don't get hurt. They come back strong from things that happen to them. Small things, they come back very quickly. Large things, it doesn't take them long to come back. They get knocked down, they get back up. They're not interested in running here and running there. They understand the importance of where they're serving, and they want to be involved in that. And they're really good because you can count on them to focus on the ministry and get things done, and the vision to get things done. They're satisfied with their job. One of the things about mature Christians is it doesn't matter where they work or what they're doing. They have learned in life to be satisfied and do all things as unto the Lord. They're excellent in fruits and character, excellent in gifts, and we'll talk about all that here as we go. Gifts of the Spirit, understand strength and weaknesses. They understand their strength, they understand their weaknesses. You need to do that because we all have them, just the way we're made up. Men have weaknesses and strengths. Women have weaknesses and strength, and you have weaknesses and strength as a person. It's important to know what they are and to get prayer cover sometimes on those things. They have good marriages if they're married. They're able teachers. They're moving toward master teachers. There's a total consecration to God's will in their life, not their will, but His been done. They get enjoyment from God. They get enjoyment from family and friends and ministry. They don't have to go out and do all kind of other things. That's where they're at. There's a deadness to censure or praise. If you criticize, if they get criticized in a wrong way, it doesn't bother them. They don't get all freaked out about it because somebody made a comment on Facebook page about them. Like they're being persecuted. You're going to be thrown to the lions or something. But that there's a deadness to that. When somebody praises them, they say thank you, but it's not going to affect them, and you're not going to get a big head. When you're mature, you're humble, except for the Lord, you couldn't do any of the things you're doing. You learn to lean on Him so much. They don't get puffed up. And you have the ability to recognize God at work, which sometimes other people don't. They think it's the devil. They do an excellent job with things. They have an ability to just get stuff done, and without you having to watch over them doing it. They develop their gifts, and they're developing their gifts enough to where they can do it better than you. That one recognizing, I'm not going to be able to get through all this. I'll do it in our next session. But the ability in a mature person to recognize God at work. I remember many times when I was rebuking everything and everybody, I thought it was just the devil. But really, what it wasn't a severe thing. It wasn't sickness or disease. I'm not talking about that. But when the trial would come to my life, like a difficult person to deal with or something, man, I wanted to get away from them. You know, but I found out later was God's way of teaching me how to get along and how to, handle people. Because if you don't ever have that, you certainly can't be a bishop. And so, but at the time, I thought the devil was attacking me. But really, it was just the Lord put that person there. Well, I've run out of time. Now, listen, I'm going to talk more about this in our next session. Please go to our website, faithalifefellowship.org. Once we're done with this mature people that we're talking about here, we will get into the test. And the test is a test where it'll be, questions, and then you just rate it from 0 to 10, sometimes 0 being the best, sometimes 10 being the best. I'll talk about that as we go. And then you'll find out how you rate. You add it all up and you'll find out where you fit in. Are you a baby? Are you a toddler, child? Are you a preteen? Are you a teenager? Or are you mature? And then you can take that test and see. You'll see where, oh boy, I need to work on this area. I'm strong in this area, but this area needs work. That's what it's all about. Well, love you guys. Till next time, God bless you.